Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Glad to be here. And thank you so much for the opportunity, Kelly, for having me in this class. I was here for the first time last Sabbath, just to check it out to see how is the flow of the things, and I feel blessed for one reason because I don't know most of you. See, I was spending a few minutes, and thank you so much, Gary, Caroline, and they were, oh, that guy was president, that guy was that afternoon. Oh, that's very intimidating. But since I don't know most of you, I will just take off. Just kidding, guys. It's something that all of us we need to answer. Actually, I'm going to start with a question and end with the same question. I'll mention a little bit about who I am, but I have a question for you. It's who are you?
Member of Forest Select Church.
Good. Usually we connect that question with things that we do, the place we are. That's a pretty tough question if you really take it seriously.
Child of God.
That's what I was.
Okay. So who I am, who am I? That's basically something that I want to share with you. I mean, quickly here. I am a disciple of Jesus Christ, trying to better understand his purposes to my life, which is something that I believe all of us, we have to do. And of course, I mean, we have different journeys. And regarding the moments I'm living right now, I want to mention briefly with you guys. I have served this church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, for a little over 32 years as a minister.
That phone.
And I've served in different places, different positions. And originally, I'm from Brazil, married to a Bolivian. And I had to add, this is the picture of my family. It's also part of who I am, a father of that family. That is our oldest daughter, Isabella. She's moving to Loma Linda in a few weeks to start dental school in there. She spent the last year in Argentina, in Spain. My son, he is Nicholas. He's at Southern right now, also a pre-dent student, dreaming of moving to Loma Linda in 2 years. My wife, Nereida, she's an OB nurse. And Gabi, our youngest daughter, she's at FLA, a senior. She's going to start her last year. If I would think about what we are going through right now in life, if you would predict that and tell me you're going to be in Orlando by July 2024, a year ago, I would tell you, you are crazy. We are going through a transition. After several months of praying and asking for God's guidance, until December of last year, I was serving at the General Conference in the Office of Adventist Mission. So basically, if I can say in a few words, I am a minister by calling, a missiologist by training, but always looking to better understand God's purposes to my life. And we have been invited to join Advent Health last year. And right now I'm serving in Carlos Park. I think Carla also is a member of this, in her team, with the mission and ministry division of the organization. I see this as a tremendous privilege for myself, for my family, but it has not been a simple transition. After 17 winters in Michigan, so you can have an idea. In 2015, we moved to Andrews University, where I was serving as a seminary professor. Had the chance to lead the Doctor of Ministry program in those years. And then before the pandemic, I was also, just full-time with the GC. Was a combined appointment. Anyway, a long story, guys, but I don't want to bore you with my story. It is maybe in the future we'll have a chance to know a little bit more. We are transitioning now in the class. And Kelly, thank you for sharing the schedule. I know you guys just finished the book of Genesis. And now we are starting the book of Exodus. And I decided just to spend a few minutes in a brief intro to the book. Actually, we're going to divide our time together in three parts. And you understand where I'm coming from and what my purpose with these minutes together. Exodus is basically, just the meaning of the title. We kind of think that the title of Bible books were always the way we thought, but actually this is an interesting process. In the beginning of the book, we see there, these are the names. Actually, the original name of the book of Exodus is Shemot, the names. That was the purpose of Moses in writing, to explain something important about the list of names. But with the process of preparing the Septuagint, we came with the current title, Exodus. Two Greek words, ek is going out, odos, road. It's a way out. Actually, that's the meaning of the book Exodus. When a group of people are migrating from one place to another, we call it an exodus. See, when people are moving. Basically, that's the title of the book. And if we pay attention, it is simply the fulfillment of a promise. The beauty of the biblical text, a God that is concerned with us and he's fulfilling a promise that he made. And actually, the promise was made to Abraham. And that's the very first missiological text, if we can say so, a call. God called Abraham for a mission. Told exactly what he would do, and now we see how this is unfolding, the fulfillment of that promise. And we see this direct connection with the last part of Genesis. And by the way, Greg guided you guys last week, was beautiful when we saw in there the moment of the great reveal, no? Joseph, his brothers, and now it's the continuation of his story. The family moved to Egypt. And Moses mentions, right, that Moses is the author of the book of Exodus, about 70 people. And there starts, friends, a new chapter of a story. And actually, if we pay attention, it is the same story that we are in right now. Another chapter of this meta-narrative that we call the Great Controversy between good and evil. That's what we see right there. That's what we see right there. And God, with the purpose of fulfilling his mission. And as this new chapter starts, we come to this, and actually I just want to briefly just mention to you guys the structure of the book. We can see the book of Exodus in three parts. The first one from chapters 1 to 18. Basically, we see the oppression on God's people and the deliverance, the covenant, the alliance that they had with God, and the instructions regarding the sanctuary, how they should build, and how worship was an integrated part of this whole process. The importance of Moses as the key human figure in the book. And actually, when we see the book of Exodus, roughly brings about 2/3 of Moses' life. The first 80 years, divided roughly in two segments of 40 years. The first one, his early life, the first 40 years, and we're going to go over a little bit more deeper today. And also the second segment, his life in Midian and the Exodus. He is the second most mentioned person in the Old Testament after David. We have David, first one, more than 1,000 citations, then Moses, and then Abraham. And Jesus mentions Moses 11 times, directly quotes and also explain the importance of Moses in Paul 18 times. And then comes Exodus 1:4. That's exactly the focus of our time together this morning. I mentioned to you the context. Jacob moved to Egypt. And of course, God's purpose was fulfilling this whole process. And then they started to grow, an extraordinary growth. God was blessing his people. And then comes this, a new king, somebody who had no idea who Joseph was. He came to power in Egypt, and everything started to change. He was concerned with what's going on, and we know well the story. He was concerned that maybe the Israelites, Hebrew people, could maybe go against them, and then he decided to move in oppression. He started little by little putting them into slavery, and they started to suffer. And then we come to a important aspect. And actually, my approach today, guys, is not a chronological order in the text. We are just focusing on the first 4 chapters. And I decided to take at least an important perspective on this part of the story, which is around choices, power of choices. And we're going to briefly here focus on the choices of some people that we see in the beginning of the book. The first 2 is the midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. You know well the story. The king Pharaoh was concerned, and then he gave them an order. He gave them an order, and they chose to what? To disobey the order of the main authority of the land. It was an intentional. We're not going to do this. Guys, that was the order. When you help the Hebrew women in childbirth, if it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. Come on. If we're going to talk about bioethical issue, a big one here. But they didn't obey. Why? Why they didn't obey? Fear God. Exactly, because it's in the biblical text. They fear God. Thank you so much. They were not afraid of God, but they knew who God was. And that relationship that those 2 ladies had with God didn't allow them to do anything, to cause any harm to the young boys, to the boys that were there. Now we have a weekly reflection checkpoint. So I have a question for you. And we're going to just spend a few minutes in here. So help me out here. How do we justify non-compliance in choosing to obey God rather than surrendering to fear of human authority? It's not a simple question, but at the same time, it should help us to understand how to make our choices. Remember the power of choices. And sometimes the choices we make, they bring results to
When you have
many
allegiance
others
to
too.
a higher authority. Have allegiance to a higher authority.
Excellent point. Allegiance to a higher authority. And that's exactly what happened with those 2 ladies. Yes,
Jesus says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God.
excellent point. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Also know whose child you are.
Hmm.
I think having that confidence and known being a child of God allows you to be different.
Act different. So you see things differently. Yeah, excellent point. Please.
Kind of the same idea, but I was just gonna say, we know how the story ends. We know that no matter what, whatever we face now, we know that in the end, God's in control.
Excellent point. But there is just, let me just make a comment about this. We know how the story ends, but sometimes when the story is happening, we don't see the results. You see, and even when we cannot see the decisions we have to make, they must be around something bigger than ourselves. but excellent point. Thank you. Yes, please.
There's also a little conundrum in there. I mean, these women are named in the Old Testament, which is unusual, so they're
That's true.
heroes,
That's true.
but they also lied. You know, they could have had the opportunity to say, I'm a servant of Yahweh and I cannot do this, but that's not what they did. They lied to Pharaoh.
Actually, I was asking myself that very question. Did they lie? Or they just had a different approach to the childbirth process? Maybe they were just moving on slow motion. You know what I mean? Because when Pharaoh asked, what's going on? Oh, king, you have no idea. Those women are not like the Egyptian ones. You see? When we get there, the babies are already out. Yeah, we don't know. But actually, one thing we know is the results of that decision. As we read the biblical text, we see that God had blessed them in a very special way because they were faithful. They made the proper choice. So another point that I want to kind of bring to you guys is the choice is now made by other two people, Aaron and Jochebed. Actually, if we don't know the details, but probably Pharaoh's decision was not something that happened just for a few weeks or a few months. But those two guys, they decided to get married. And they decided to have a baby. And the baby came. What to do now? We know well the decisions that they had to make and the courage to also defy Pharaoh's commands. Since his original plan didn't work, now he gave a different command. He basically told the whole country, you know what, you guys help me out. Let's eradicate every single boy, every single baby boy. But they chose to obey in a very different way. If we just pay attention, look at this. That was the order, the second order. Every boy that is born, you must throw into the Nile. You see? And maybe they say, you know what, we're going to do this. We're going to throw him in the Nile, but in a different way. You see? Yeah. They kind of, they found a shortcut in the order. And actually, it is something amazing here, guys. I was just looking at the original text. When we read there the papyrus basket, that little container, a little box where they put baby Moses, that word happens just twice in the whole Bible. And you guys can kind of guess where is the other occurrence of the word. You see the same word, the word basket, teva, happens here. God told Noah, you're going to build a teva to me, a box, a different box. And when I saw this, man, this is amazing. This is amazing. A way of deliverance, salvation, God's intervening in human history in a very special way. No wonder when Moses was writing this, I mean, he had this clear understanding that God had a greater purpose for his life. He understood this, probably hearing from his parents. But just going back to that decision, we see the divine deliverance. We see there the way God was protecting Moses with a special purpose. Then comes something special. Jochebed was praying that somehow the Lord would save her baby boy. And it happened in a very wonderful way. When you just read the story, Pharaoh's daughter decided to take a bath exactly in the direction where the little baby was. And she saw it. And she fell. I mean, she sent one of her servants, pick it up, open it. The baby was crying. And she felt compassion. She connected with the baby. And she said, it's a Hebrew baby. She knew it. She knew it. But then she did, I'm gonna keep him. I'm gonna keep him. Just see the bigger scheme of things, friends. Miriam was there watching. She comes, "Great idea. You know, ma'am, do you need somebody to help you out with that baby? Well, do you know anyone? Oh, my might. And comes, and now Jochebed is being paid to take care of her own son. You see? But she knew that would not last too long. She knew it. And because she knew it, friends, I have this text I want to read to you. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 243. Pay attention. Jochebed's endeavor to imbue Moses' mind with the fear of God, with the love of truth and justice, and earnestly prayed that he might be preserved from every corrupting influence. He showed him the folly of sin and idolatry, and really taught him to bow down and pray to the living God, who alone could hear him and help him in every emergency. She knew her time was short, and she did her very best to teach that child because they knew he was special. He was not a simple baby. She did her best, praying for his child. And all of us who have kids, we know the importance of a mother and a father praying for their children. We have different stories, friends. All of us. We know somebody who is suffering because of the decisions of the children. But don't give up. Continue with your prayers. That's what Jochebed did all the time, praying that the Lord would help her to raise up Moses in God's ways. Another reflection checkpoint, a quick one here. But how should we wait when apparently our prayers are not being answered? What should be our attitude? When we pray, we ask, and we don't see what we're expecting. Anyone can help us?
God's timing.
In God's timing. Thank you. Yes, please.
I had a question similar to that. I mean, here we see the biblical narrative of Exodus having Moses saved in a very miraculous way. And yet, I'm sure there were many other children who died. And many mothers who prayed, their prayers were not answered. So how do you?
When I wrote that question, I had exactly the same feeling that you have just expressed. Moses was spared. How many others were not?
Not, yes, sir.
Yep, it is not. And actually, friends, it goes back to basically one of the toughest questions that we as human beings try to answer at the time. In my former life, before I moved to Orlando, I was working as the director of the Center for Secular and Post-Christian Mission at the General Conference. One of the toughest questions we get from secular people is exactly around suffering. How can you guys be talking about a God of love? Look around. And there are some things that we don't have the answers. Tough questions, and that's a tough one. One thing we know for sure, God's purposes will always be fulfilled. And some of those, I have questions even harder than that one. And probably the answers we only receive when he comes back. But one thing we know for sure, that what he had in vision for the family was important in the decisions and choices that Moses' parents were at that point making. But the story doesn't stop there, friends. When Moses turned 12, she had to give him back to the mother, to the princess of Egypt, Pharaoh's daughter. When the child grew older, Jochebed took him to Pharaoh's daughter. And here, friends, we're going to shift completely the teaching, the moment we're having together, okay? Allow me to do this. You guys can read the whole chapters at home. Here starts the twist. Look at this. and he became her son. This was probably one of the toughest moments in Moses' life, because for the next 28 years, Moses was enculturated. He was forced to go through several attempts of a brainwashing process. Moses had to learn the language, the Egyptian language, to eat the Egyptian foods, to sit in their schools. Actually, he had so many talents, special skills. They came to a point, and it's amazing when you read the chapter of Moses. Look at this. And just one more thing I want to point it out is that she named him Moses, Pharaoh's daughter, saying, I drew him out of the water. Just a little thing that we need to just imagine. She had this feeling, I drew him out of the water. Really? Yeah. There are moments in life that, and actually help you to understand also those questions that we don't have the answers, that only God can take something good out of a bad situation. And we are seeing this happening. She thought that she was right there with the control in her hands, but she was just being used by God to the fulfillment of his purposes. So there was Moses. 28 years going through that whole process, a process that was forcing him to be who he was not. And to a point in which he had to face that question, who am I? Who am I? He was forced to understand this. And this is what we find in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 245. The monarch, Pharaoh, had determined to make his adopted grandson his successor on the throne. And Moses was educated for his high station. Basically, we had in mind to have him as the next Pharaoh. And when we go through the Egyptian heritage and culture, we learn one thing. The Pharaoh was the head of the religion process. So for him to be trained for that thing, he had to go through the whole spiritual development around the Egyptian religion. And if we read the whole chapter, Patriarchs and Prophets, you see that Moses refused. He had arguments with the priests of the Egyptian religion. So he did not accept. He was basically saying, I'm not going to be what you guys want me to be. But let me just run here, friends, because I want to kind of focus on something else, which was important. One day came, and this is very important to understand. Moses, after he had grown up, he went out where, and look at this, the text said his own people. He knew he was a Hebrew. He saw his own people, and he saw that one Egyptian was beating one of his fellow countrymen, and basically he kind of intervened and killed the guy. Guys, it's amazing when we read, because this is a autobiography. Moses is writing about himself, and he says, Moses, he looked to one side, he looked to another side, and since he didn't see anyone, he killed the Egyptian. He forgot to look up, see, but anyway, that's a moment that changed also Moses' life. Another twist. He thought that maybe with force, with his military skills, he could change the situation. The word came to Pharaoh. Pharaoh got scared. Maybe he's starting an insurrection. And he said, Moses has to go. And now Moses has to flee. And then starts another period of his life. 40 years of another transformation in his mind.
I can't help you with that.
I'm so sorry, sir. Just
Before you go over that so quickly,
Alexa.
here's an example of someone taking another life that appears to have God looking the other way. In other words, does that justify, let's say someone comes into my home and starts attacking my family. Am I justified to take that person's life, or do we do what Christ said, turn the other cheek?
what do you think?
I'd take the life in a heartbeat.
Agree with that.
Yeah. There were a couple of things in Patriarchs and Prophets that struck me before we move. One, since you've mentioned military a couple times, Ellen White said that he excelled in military skills, and that was what his greatest talent was. And I was thinking how useful that is for taking 1 million or 2 slaves and turning them into a nation and marching them through a desert and, organizing them and all this kind of stuff. The other thing that I thought about was how Ellen White also said in Patriarchs and Prophet that he excelled at words. He was a great speaker. And then you find 40 years later, oh, I can't talk. You can't ask me to do that. And I think it kind of shows how you can lose a talent, not only from lack of use, but lack of confidence. Because when he had this mistake he made that diverted him, in his eyes at least, from what he was supposed to be doing, I'm sure he mulled about that the whole 40 years that he was in the desert, and that kept him. That's one of the reasons when 40 years later he needed to speak, he couldn't.
Thank you for both comments. And actually, guys, I'm gonna use exactly what you have mentioned because of the things that were happening in Moses' life. Because of that decision, and we know this greater scheme of things, he had to flee. And his life changed, and I love this movie. I don't know how many times I have watched this. I just love it with my kids, Prince of Egypt. And something special happened. As he was fleeing, finds this well, it's down, bunch of girls come. They want just to give water to their livestock. Shepherds come, you know the story. He helps them out. And things changed because the girls could go back earlier to their home and pay close attention to this. When they returned, their father, Jethro, asked them, why have you returned so early today? Did you see the answer?
The Egyptian.
An Egyptian helped us. Friends, that's the focus of today's teaching. I'm sorry for not giving you the chance, but let me just go. I'm going to change completely the topic. Moses knew he was a Hebrew. We just read my own people. When others were looking at him, they didn't see a Hebrew. They saw an Egyptian. And then he goes through another transformation in his life. Do you remember? That was a crazy thing. Jethro, come on, bring that guy over. Let's give him dinner. And I don't know how longer, he gives one of his daughters to Moses. Man, this is good. Life is good to me. They have a child. Do you remember the name of the child? Gershon. And the meaning? He says, I became a foreigner in a foreign land. The same words. He became the son of the princess. The same thing. I became now no one. A Jew raised up as an Egyptian, now in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. And if we pay close attention, Moses had to learn a third language. His mind was all messed up. What Moses had to face in his life is what we call a worldview change, a completely worldview change. In the next few minutes, what we have left, allow me now to bring a little bit about my passion. It's understanding of how people change. That's what Moses had to go through. And actually, it goes through a process that we call the worldview challenge. And please bear with me. You understand what I'm coming and to share with you guys. When you talk about a worldview change, we are talking about how culture affects us. All of us, we come from different backgrounds. All of us, we come with a different story, a cultural experience, and it is a mapping of who we are. Do you remember the question? Who am I? Who are you? Here comes part of the answer to you. I have just 4 brief definitions of what a culture is. When you go to a place that you feel a stranger, probably you're facing some cultural shock. You see, have you guys felt this? You go to a man, I have no idea what's going on here. These guys are completely different from me. So when you feel strange, you see a different patterns in behaviors. People, they react in different ways. That's a more complex one, a complex integrated coping mechanism. And I love the last one. Sjogren says, is what makes us and them. It is the difference, the barrier between us, because we kind of learn life in a different way. And here are some of the aspects that are in the way all of us, no exceptions. Hard to say that, no exceptions, we are affected in those areas. It's the way we see even the concept of time, even the way we see money. I'm going to give you an example. You see, I have a $20 bill. In some cultures, when you see money on the ground, people, oh, somebody lost this. You see, you look for the owner. Oh, let's see who lost this. In other cultures, when you see this in the, thank you, Jesus. Yeah. And I'm kind of part of that culture, you see? Yeah, I mean, time. In Latin cultures, to understand the concept of time, it's different. Gary knows about it. You know, Gary? I'm not going to be there on time. I don't want to be the first. In our mind, I'm not going to be the first. Guys, in 30 seconds, my family, we lost a whole wedding. We were invited to travel to Phoenix, drive to Mexico for a nice resort, the whole family. And then I told my wife, I told her, baby, it's time. Oh, no, they're not going to be there. You see, I don't want to be the first. We waited for 20 minutes to go to the beach because it was a beach wedding. When we arrived, no one was there. Then she told me, you see, we are first. Then when we asked, the wedding was over. They did the whole thing in 5 minutes. They were worshiper of the sun. The wedding was over. We lost it. And the family, it's a cousin of ours. They don't know up to now. They think that we saw the whole thing. We just mingle in the pictures up and tell them. Shh. They don't know we didn't see a thing. You see, a cultural aspect. I have a couple of, quick pictures here. I took this picture last day. I was in Madrid. Guys, when you see an arrow like that, what do you think? This arrow here.
Downstairs.
You go down, okay? So when I saw, I was looking for the elevator. I went down. You see, actually, I was looking for the exit of the airport, and it means go ahead, go straight. This is in. I took this in Frankfurt. You see, it's straight. Everything changes depending on the cultural paradigm. This is a picture I took in elevator in Oslo. When I went inside, I said, man, how do I go down? The ground level. They don't have it. You see, because this is an elevator in Brazil. Oops, I'm sorry. See, the ground level is 0. One is the first one, and then the second. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We look at life in different ways. And then there are some really tough aspects regarding this whole process. It's how we see life. And actually, friends, That's exactly what Moses was going through. It's how we see reality, how worldview develops. It's the way you see things around you. He was a Jew, a Hebrew. He was raised and trained with the man, 28 years. Not a weekend, not a summer camp. 28 years going through the thing. Suddenly, because of his decision, now he's in the middle of nowhere for 40 years. And he writes a long period. It's his own words. After that long period, he had to understand how to face life in a different way. Friends, I just want to go over here with you, talk about these levels of change that we go through. We have some superficial ways of looking at things, but there are deeper aspects. And I want to finish this part of the worldview challenge with an illustration that will help you to understand. Let's just pretend that this is a human being, an iceberg. And the biggest part of an iceberg is not above water level. It is below, and you don't see it. You don't see it. And we use this in anthropology and missiology as well. What people see, what I can see on you right now is just that you are sitting there. Some of you really pay attention. That's what I can see. You see? That's all I can see is the behavior. That's why when Zipporah said, an Egyptian helped us, that's what she saw. She only saw the little tip of the iceberg. She couldn't see the deeper things. What people cannot see, what is hidden, is really, really important. We have 3 levels here. The first one, our values. Our behavior is a result of our value, the way we see something. And it comes out of our beliefs, and the deepest part, it is our work. And it goes in this direction, from bottom up. From here, we have our beliefs, our values, and our behavior. Why am I showing this to you? When we talk about change, transformation in our relationship with God, which level do you think that God wants to see transformation ourselves? Where do you want to be changed? The thing is, it's always easy for us to change in our behaviors. It's always easier because we can fake, we can pretend, we can kind of use approaches that people will think that we are not who we really are.
It has to start with the worldview, nothing else.
Yeah, has to be. And actually, just a little tip to you guys. Usually when we have habits that we try to break and we are not consistent, we are facing an issue in worldview, depending on what is going on in our lives. Many years ago, I read a book. The title was, Who Are You When Nobody Is Looking? Nobody was looking when Moses killed the Egyptian. He thought no one is saying. He wrote it. No one was saying it. Did you see he had an issue with his worldview? Friends, I'm just mentioning this to you that so we can understand that we go through moments in our lives. But there is a equalizer moment. All of us are the same. The moment, it doesn't matter how many little letters you have after your name. Doesn't matter what is your last name, family, your position. It doesn't matter. The equalizer moment comes to all of us. In that moment, we need to understand how to answer this question. Who am I? Moses had to understand this, really fulfill God's dreams to his own life. After that long 40 years, Suddenly comes the moment in which he's walking around in the desert, taking care of the animals in there. He sees the burning. You guys know the story. He sees the burning bush. What's going on? God was attracting his attention. He comes closer. Moses, Moses. You know the story. And then the conversation that God had with Moses, he mentions to him, Moses, I am the God of your father. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac. Moses, I've seen their misery. Moses, I've heard. Moses, I'm going to change things. I came to rescue. I came to bring them to another place. And I'm just kind of imagining Moses listening to that. That's great, Lord. That's awesome. Just a little thing, Moses, is I'm sending you for this mission. It's you, Moses. And friends, I just love not only the introduction of the book of Exodus, probably the whole book was around one simple question. Chapter 3, verse 11. The moment God says, I'm sending you, he asks the question, Lord, who am I? Actually, you can kind of say, he was talking to God in several other things. What if they ask who you are? Every single answer, every argumentation he had to God was around the same issue. Understand who he was. They don't believe in me. Lord, have in your hands. Lord, I don't know how to speak. Who has created the mouth? Who was an Aaron? All the excuses Moses was giving, they went around one simple issue. Who he was. And friends, to end, I brought something for you to think about your own life. Basically, we have to answer this. Who am I? And I just love what we find about Moses. I mentioned to you that Paul mentions Moses in the New Testament. And in Hebrews 11, we find 4 short verses that points out to us exactly why that answer was important to Moses. First one, it's regarding identity, his own identity. Just pay attention to what we find in Hebrews. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, he refused. He refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Came to a point that he had to, things are changing today. He refused. He refused it was a tough decision for him. It was not the opposite. I mean, he was not a slave going to the Pharaoh's palace. It was exactly the opposite. He refused to be known as somebody he was not. He had to understand who he was. I'm not an Egyptian. I'm not going to follow this and exactly what we have mentioned here. What will do, how to behave before situations like this. So that's the decision he made around his own identity. And then comes the second point is, who do you want to be? And around his responsibility. He mentions, he chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. The first one, he refuses. Now he makes a choice, which is different. Friends, every time we go through moments in which we need to make hard choices regarding who we are, we have a price to pay. Sometimes the price is not that high. Sometimes it's a high price that we have to pay. But he knew he had a responsibility, and he decided not to be caught by these pleasures that were right there before him. He had power, he had pleasures, he had prestige, he had everything. And he had to give up, not to fulfill God's dreams for his life. Third one is priorities in life. And I just love this, what Paul writes in there. He regarded his grace for the sake of Christ because he was looking ahead to his reward. Priorities in our lives. And all of us, we need to understand how we can really put things in the proper order as we go through our journeys. And that's not a simple thing to do. What is the priority of your life? What is more important to you? And the last one is regarding how we should live. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger, and he persevered because he saw him who is invisible. He persevered. He decided to change the reality of his own life, answering that question regarding his own identity. And he had the courage, he had the strength to really face the situation in such a way that he could persevere, tenacity, the resilience in his decisions. And that kind of stuff doesn't come with our own strength. There are moments in life that we need to get something bigger than us. Every single year, I pick a Bible verse to be the theme of my life for that year. This year, we've been reflecting on Psalm 61, verse 2. And David, in their prayer to God, he says, lead me to a rock that is higher than I. The moments in our lives, we need to be sure that something bigger than us will guide us, will lead us. And Moses understood this. He was not perfect. The journey was ahead of him 40 more years. And life was not easy to Moses. That people was hard. But because of that experience in which he was faced with that question of who he was, Moses was able to really face the challenges with that assurance. And the Lord who told him, tell them, Moses, I am who I am. And that's not a simple thing when God tells that to us. Because he was, he is, and he will be. And he will be with us if we understand who we are. And I mentioned in the beginning that I'm going to end with the same question. And after we better understand the importance of the answer to that question, all of us, we need to kind of reflect. Who am I in reality? Beyond positions, beyond family connections, beyond the network that we have, each one of us, because in the end, I think that's a question that all of us have to answer to him, because he's going to ask us, who are you? And today we live a continuation of the same story. All of us we have to face situations in which we need not only to understand the answer to that question, but to demonstrate in our decisions who we really are. And my sincere prayer to all of you is that you remember today with this question. You live out with that question. Who am I? My sincere prayer is that you will know how to answer.
Amen.
Because if we still struggle to answer that question today, we better find the answer soon.
Yeah.
Let's together grow. Let's together focus, understand our identity, and to live according to his needs and purposes to our lives. Guys, it's just around a simple decision. decision that you have to make, that I have to make. And that's the time. I hope you really know what to say. Father, we thank you so much for opportunity that you have given us to briefly focus on this amazing story, the introduction of the book of Exodus, where we find the struggle that Moses had to face with the changes in his life, with the changes in worldview that he had to go through. And he came to a point in which he was sincere. And with you, he just asked, who am I, Lord, to do this? And thank you, Lord, because you didn't give up on him, and you helped him to understand who he was, and you used him in an amazing way. Lord, at this moment, we humbly come to you, all of us. And even if we don't really know how to really say this, because you know exactly what goes in our lives. Help us, Lord, not to understand our identity, but to make the proper changes when they are necessary. Please bless us with your presence, with your guidance. Help us always remember that you are the great I am. He's always there to help us and to guide us, to bless us, and to help us to understand exactly who we are in connection with you. Give us, Lord, your grace, your peace, with our loved ones, wherever they are. And all of us want to be ready for the moment when Christ comes. Until then, Lord, use us according to your will. In all of this we ask. In the precious name of your Son, the one we love so much, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Excellent.
Robin, his wife. Oh, I'm busy.
Kelly.